Classic Porsche 911. Those are three words that carry a lot of weight in the automotive world. My name's Christian Delise, and this is mine. I've had this car about 14 years now, and I'm coming to grips with selling it. This is a 1996 Carrera 2. It's the last generation of the air-cooled. It's a 6-speed manual. It's a coupe. Has some modifications, although all tastefully done and to Porsche spec. And it's got 123,000 miles on it. This car will be going to auction very soon. I'm building a car company, and apparently developing cars takes a lot of money. So that's in part why I'm doing this. It's also in part to close a chapter in my life where I got my dream car, I drove it, I drove the hell out of it. I did everything I wanted to with this car. I've modded it, I've taken it cross country multiple times with friends, road tripped, camped, tracked. I've done all the things. I'm making this video personally to get closure, but also to explain why these cars have become such collectible items, and how we're also using this philosophy in producing our own cars for Delise Automotive. Delise Automotive is a startup I founded 4 years ago based on an idea I had nearly as long ago as when I bought this car. So let's start with some backstory. When I was a kid growing up in the 80s, my father was an attorney, although he wasn't a hugely successful attorney yet. He still made decent money. In the 80s, you could import Porsches under special tax law straight from Germany, direct from Stuttgart, and come out on top. So you buy one over there for 30 grand, you ship it over here, you could sell it for 45 or so. He did this a number of times until he could afford his own, and that experiencing those cars early on really cemented a passion for them, not just as a brand, but the smells, the experience, the feeling of them, the sound. I was small enough to sit in the back seat, and it felt, like a whole world back there. This car underneath still shares a lot of the same chassis and monocoque structure as the original 911 and the 911 of those time. So let's get to some core character attributes of this. Until 1998, 911s were an iterative process. They evolved from the original packaging design. They basically shared the same door frame all the way back. Same A-pillar, same underlying structure. And so with that, you get one of the car's most quintessential attributes, which is its build quality and fit and finish. And this can most well be illustrated by the front doors. So an irreplicable sound, except perhaps by maybe a modern Mercedes G-Wagon, is the door sound. As a part, this door design has really stood the test of time, even through the model line. And it makes the personality of this car apparent right from the start. Another aspect that evolved heavily from the early models was these rear section, this rear quarter panel, the hips of the car, as one might call it. Sensuous hips, right? Look at the curve and the reflection of that highlight. It's a perfect shape. Now, this was originally only put on the turbo models, but by the 90s, in order to shed its reputation as a widowmaker, they widened the rear track. The 993 was the first to get the Weissach rear suspension, which actually first debuted on the Porsche 928 in the 80s. It's a passive rear steer in that there's no actual power actuated mechanism, but there is a toe-in feature. Under heavy load in a curve, the rear wheels kick in a bit to give you more stability. They're not as reactive as some of the older models. Some say that's true character that exists in the older models. I say this brings this modern but analog appeal in this package. And it also meant the base Carreras got the sensuous hips that were previously only on the turbo models. So this rear section, both visually and functionally, is one of my favorite aspects of this car, how they massaged and refined the engineering to make this model more usable. This car has no stability control, no traction control. You really get nothing except talent and mechanical grip back here. And it just makes the most beautiful shape. So one thing you'll notice about this particular car is it has the original cup rims on it that came from the factory, but we've powder coated them gray. This is a matte gray color code that was used on the 959S models. So a real distinctive look, not too dark, not too light, and it kind of highlights the big reds we have under here. I was at a shop getting the brakes serviced, and the shop happened to have an extra set of turbo big red calipers, and we said, why not put those on? So this particular car actually has turbo level brakes, which was not even an option. I think it was an option on the S, but not on the base. So beautiful front setup here, and those big reds. I mean, this was before every single car company painted the calipers. This was a real unique thing that showed you were driving a race car. So the business end, rear mounted, 3.6 liter naturally aspirated flat six. This engine is really cool, and it's the last time they made them this way. If you actually look at the manifolds, each cylinder manifold has heat sink, not too dissimilar to old race cars and motorcycles. Again, they don't make motors like this anymore, and it sounds according. At one point I repainted this deck lid. This was just a matte black, but we repainted it in the polar silver. Powder coated the exhaust tips. There's hardly any chrome on this car, and so it didn't seem right for them to be chrome. One of my favorite modifications, and the first thing I did when I got the car, was modified muffler cans. So out of the factory, these came noticeably more quiet than the older 911s. So there's a company in California called Pfister where they take the original units and do some modifications to them. And now you get a crisp, throaty, gnarly sound that's more akin to the 80s and 70s cars. You know, it's one of the best sounding engines, in my opinion, you can get. Inside, we have traditional 911 layout, horizontal dashboard, simple setup, the original Porsche head unit, which is a CDR Becker unit. I put in a input aux cord through the back, so it thinks it's a CD changer, but you can plug in your phone while keeping the stock head unit. Traditional switch gears, which were added into the 90s. You've got this really cool blocky hazard lights. You also have the oh shit button, I call it, which is just a big exclamation point. What this is when you get a light on your dash, apparently from racing heritage, you get a light on your dash and you don't really see it right away. So they give you a big red oh shit light right here. That says, hey, look at the lights, check your dash, and then you can cancel it out right there. Then you have sunroof and manual activated spoiler. I also modified the spoiler relay so that the spoiler doesn't automatically come up and down at 50, and then when you get back down to, I think it's 30, it goes back down. It can be annoying when you're driving. You know, you're driving around and every time you slow back down, the motor in the back is doing unnecessary work throughout the drive. So this allows it to now just manually go up or down And you can leave it there, you can leave it up, or you can leave it down just by this switch. So it gave a lot more functionality to this. Aftermarket steering wheel. This is from a company called Renown. Really nice fit and finish. It's got the red contrast stitching. Also did red piping on these new floor mats had made. So subtle interior colors, but a much more grip and section to this than the old airbag unit. And it also sits closer out since this does not telescope or angle as a steering column. So to have longer legs and be in here, this is a lot more comfortable. I also tripped the intermittent wipers. So the wipers are still, fully functional at all speeds, but you can now park them wherever you want. You can park them in the middle, race car style. You can park them off to the side. I always thought these windshield wipers obstructed the view of the beautiful hood and fender shapes. So with this, you can park them over on one side, you can park them on the other, you can park them wherever you want, but you still get the full functionality of the traditional unit. And then inside, we've got backlit gauges that I replaced the bulbs, which were fading, with true amber orange, so a lot truer to the original spec, but even brighter and more color to them. Also did that here in the HVAC, where you can see, again, 6-speed manual, which we put a short shift kit on. So it's got an FD Motorsport short shift. A lot of people say that the original is a really long throw. It's still long. It's still by no means a modern short shift, but it does give you a lot more precise motion to it, and just a better feeling shifter all around. Airbag, fog lights, glove box with original manual. Seats are manual, of course, and then you have the back adjustment here. What I love about this interior is it shows all of the classic analog attributes, like these individual roundel gauges, but you've got modern amenities, you've got modern air conditioning, very reliable. So from the driver's side, I wanted to give a more detailed look. We've got a new surround bezel, a machined, I believe it's an aluminum cover. These usually wear, so we replaced that. Better look at the lights and the backlighting. A lot of these came with the original flip key, which breaks, so I reverted to actually the valet and backup key, which is a cooler design, and it happens to be red. There's your oh shit light, fuel, oil level, oil temp, pressure of oil, which I always remember as a kid, if this ever drops, you're in trouble. Tachometer, obviously, speedometer, 123,000 miles on this car. You wouldn't know it. I've driven ones and seen ones that have low miles and have never really been pushed, and they need a lot of work because that engine is built to be stressed and flexed a lot. And so I've seen cars with 60,000 miles that need a complete engine rebuild, whereas the driven ones, you're really just starting to break it in at 100,000 plus. Better view of the wheel. And another thing you'll notice, everybody's always reaching for the door handles in these cars. Older 911s and Porsches had a little reflector, like a glow-in-the-dark circle, which nobody could really see. I've opted just to wrap these in some high-quality gaffer tape, so they're red. Again, sticking with this red and black theme, it's a nice way to contrast the door panel and also give people, a functional highlight to where the door panel is for when they need to grab it. These switches all work. Sometimes these go out, but they're easy to replace. I believe I have an extra one or two. Just another satisfying analog. Even though it's an automatic window, this is about as nice of a click as you could get. Pedal box is narrow, right? So you've got only so much room, but because you've got such nice headroom here, you don't feel cramped inside this car. Another cool feature that people often overlook or wonder, what is that? The antenna for this car is embedded in the windshield. So the center line of the car actually is represented by this windshield line right up through here. So a pretty cool feature with that. It also has cruise control, which is nice. As a GT car, this car is very comfortable. I'll talk about the suspension modifications and the other drivetrain modifications, but again, a small, compact, classic car with all the character and build quality, but a really genuine, comfortable, long-distance cruiser. This thing will sit at 80 all day, low RPMs in 6th gear, which is the efficiency gear, and it takes the bumps better than most new cars. I mean, it's just a real, you could get in this car and put 3,000 miles on it, no problem. Engine. Overhead Vario RAM. So this was a new innovation for this year where you have variable inlet valves, right? So at lower RPM, you're puttering along, it opens up one valve to get regular air intake into the manifold. At higher RPMs, you notice that valve actuates and you get a lot throatier sound and you get a lot more power in the power band due to this intake effect. It's a really cool system. Some cars don't have it. Some cars, this is even plastic, whereas in here it's a cast piece. You've got air conditioning unit running here. All the belts are new. RS motor mounts. So you get that tight chassis with this engine bolted directly to it, but it's an OEM Porsche part. So OEM RS motor mounts. We also did the airbox sound modification, which was a factory option. Basically just gives you some better intake sound that comes into the cabin, especially when this valve opens up. So up front here, you have a freshly painted hood, matches really well. They did a great job of matching factory paint. HID headlights with a little receiver box in the back. They give you a much clearer view of the road. These actually had projection lenses, which was a first on this model, but only certain options had the xenon upgrade. To get it from Porsche is like $3,000. We did a really nice kit, still German, but gives you the xenon effect. And also did racing yellow high beams to give kind of a rally car effect. We could show those off in a minute. So under the hood, standard frunk here. We do have an engine kill switch I installed at some point because sometimes the car does sit and it's nice to have that. That's also an RS feature that the early RS cars had with an engine kill switch there. We do have original spare, original air compressor and tool kit with all tools included. So again, a lot of these cars might be missing this stuff. Ready to go. It's really cool how Germans just think of all this worst case scenario stuff. They take safety and accessories very important. So this is a feature that a lot of Porsches have, but I think it's just one of the coolest and most clever ways to do a headlight integration. So you've got this beautiful headlight surround. It's sat deep in its bucket in the fender here. To take it out, there's actually a lever here, which if you pop, pull it up, the whole headlight comes out. No wires to disconnect. Again, this is really clean in here. Sometimes you get rust down here. This one's nearly perfect. But the entire housing is in here, including the HID bucket that sits, the HID module that sits in here. You've got your adjustments for lens tilt. And then, again, no wires to unplug. It just sits within its bucket. Lines right back up and is reinstalled. Lines back up and is reinstalled really smooth. Back into its place, put the lever back, and you're good to go. So clever, so simple. And you know, if you got to change a headlight on the side of the road at night, you could do this in 3 minutes. So sitting inside this car brings up a lot of emotion for me. This was my first dream car that I actually acquired and realized since I was a little kid. I was in car design school in the mid-2000s, and these cars were in the teens. I mean, you could get one for 18 grand that was, 50,000 miles, all the stuff you want, the coupe, the manual transmission. And I just thought, well, that's just so much car for the money. But the market was treating it as just a used Porsche. So then fast forward a couple years, I was working with Toyota in Japan, living and working in Japan. I had no car. It was the first time since I was 13 that I didn't have a car to tinker on or drive. I was an expat in foreign land, but I was making good money and was able to save a good bit. And, what else do you work for but to dream to own something like this? So that was when I started looking online from overseas and found this car in San Luis Obispo. It was about $27,000, which, thinking now how much they've appreciated, I was just ahead of the market. Although the market was starting to appreciate them a little bit more, it really reached its stride in value and collectability in the late 2000 teens. After which, I just had to keep it. But I never wanted to treat this car delicately. This is a driver's car. When I first got this car, I picked it up in San Luis Obispo after I got off an international flight, drove it to San Francisco, hung out with some friends, and then the next day drove it to Colorado, where I stored it at my parents' house for the next year until I moved back to the States. This car has been across the country multiple times. It's never missed a beat. It's one of the most reliable and enjoyable cars in the world. And it's simple. It's a simple enjoyment. So let's talk about why I'm selling this car. Well, pretty much since that same era when I acquired it, as a young car designer, I just became obsessed with quality and character, and honestly, with this as a great example, depreciation or appreciation. There are just certain cars that are immune to time as a negative factor in both their value and perception in the world. This is one of them. Regardless of the era, this car fits. It fits in many environments. It's not overstyled. It's not, but it still looks great. So when I say qualities, it's not just build quality, but it's also the care given to these little design details and thinking about how people live with this car over decades. You can see the thought condensed into this car. In such a small package, you have so much attention to every aspect of it, and it really tells, and that's why it stands the test of time. That's why cars are worth falling in love with, because we have a relationship with them that goes beyond owning, using, and discarding them. And why I founded this company is to bring this quality back, to do it with an American brand that has all the benefits of traditional build quality, handcrafted, but also the efficiencies demanded of the world now in both operating efficiency and, more importantly, longevity. Cars will get more efficient, yes, but their longevity is equally as important to their value from a sustainability and economic standpoint. It's just as important a factor as anything else. So when I founded Delise Automotive, it was under the brief that we could make a car that would improve over time in its hardware and kind of take this idea of long-lasting build quality to the next level.